Welcome. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that is absolutely the bedrock of civil engineering, especially if you're hitting the books for those certification exams. We're talking about leveling. Let's break down everything you need to know to nail it.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll get fluent in the language of leveling. Then we'll get our boots on the ground with field methods. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of correcting for the Earth's curve, figure out how to handle obstacles you'll run into, and we'll finish up by looking at some finer points like the horizon and instrument sensitivity.
Okay, first things first, we have to speak the language. These core terms are the foundation for literally everything else we're going to talk about. Getting these down cold is non-negotiable for your exams.
So what is leveling, really? When you strip it all down, it's just a method for figuring out height differences. That's it. The whole point is to find out precisely how much higher or lower one spot is compared to another.
But, to measure any height, you've got to have a starting point, right? A zero line. In our world, that's called the datum plane. And the global standard, the one we all agree on, is mean sea level, or MSL. And this isn't just some line in the sand. It's calculated from the average of all high and low tides over almost 20 years. That gives us an incredibly stable, universally accepted baseline.
So whenever you see reduced level or just RL on an exam question, your brain should immediately think, okay, that's the official height of a point above mean sea level. This is usually the answer you're trying to calculate.
Okay, so this is how we bring that abstract idea of mean sea level out to our actual job site. We use benchmarks. These are fixed points that have a known RL. And you've got four main flavors. GTS benchmarks are the gold standard, set with unbelievable precision by national survey agencies. You'd use these for massive projects. Then you have permanent benchmarks, which are set by local agencies on super stable things like bridge abutments or buildings. They're your reliable local reference points. For a specific job, say a few months of construction, you'll probably set up your own temporary benchmark. And for really small-scale stuff, like laying out a garden, you can even just create an arbitrary benchmark and give it a convenient elevation, like 100.00, just to keep everything consistent.
So we've got the vocabulary down. Now let's see how this all comes together in the real world. How do we actually take these ideas and use them to measure things out in the field?
So when you're out there, you're going to be taking three main types of readings. First is your back sight, or BS. This is always your first measurement from a new instrument setup. And, this is critical, it has to be on a point you already know the elevation of, like a benchmark. Then, your foresight, or FS, is the very last reading you take before you pack up and move the instrument. And all the other readings you take in between, those are your intermediate sights, or IS. They're what you use to map out all the points in the middle.
Now, one of the most common ways to crunch the numbers is the height of instrument method, or HI method. It's a really straightforward two-step dance. First, you figure out the exact elevation of your instrument. You do that by taking the known RL of your benchmark and adding your back sight reading to it. Boom, that's your HI. After that, finding the RL of any other point is easy. You just subtract the staff reading at that point from your HI. It's super fast, especially if you can see a ton of points from one spot.
The other main approach is the rise and fall method. This one's a little different. Here, you're always comparing one point directly to the one right before it. If your next staff reading is smaller, that means the ground went up. That's a rise. If the reading is bigger, the ground went down. That's a fall. You then calculate the new RL by simply adding the rise or subtracting the fall from the previous point's RL. It's a bit more calculation for sure, but its huge advantage is that it has a built-in check for every single point, which makes it much easier to catch a mistake right when you make it.
Okay, everyone, listen up. This right here, this is your absolute lifeline in an exam. You must perform this check. The sum of all your back sights minus the sum of all your foresights has to equal the last RL you calculated minus the very first RL you started with. And if you use the rise and all method, both of those numbers also have to equal the sum of your rises minus the sum of your falls. If those numbers don't match perfectly, you've made a math error somewhere. It's your safety net. Use it.
All right, so everything we've talked about until now kind of works on a sneaky assumption that the Earth is flat.
which is fine for short distances. But once you start measuring over longer sites, that little assumption falls apart, and we have to deal with the fact that we live on a big, round ball.
And this is the question that really separates basic leveling from high-precision surveying. See, your instrument projects a perfectly straight horizontal line of sight, but a true level line actually curves to follow the surface of the Earth. Over distance, these two lines spread apart. So we have to apply a correction for this curvature, and another one for atmospheric refraction, which is just the fancy term for how light bends as it travels through the air.
This table breaks it down perfectly. Because of curvature, your straight line of sight ends up being too high, so your reading on the staff is higher than it should be. That's why the correction is always negative. But then you have refraction. The light from the staff bends slightly downwards as it travels to you, making you read a little too low. So that correction is always positive. There are two opposing forces you have to account for.
So, for any exam question, this is almost always the formula you're going to use. It combines both of those effects, curvature and refraction, into one simple, powerful calculation. You absolutely have to memorize this one. The combined correction, C, equals negative 0.0673 times the distance d squared. Just make sure your distance is in kilometers, and your answer will pop out in meters. Easy.
Okay, let's talk about a classic real-world problem. You're out on a survey, and there's a river or maybe a deep valley right in your way. Obviously, you can't just set up your instrument in the middle of it, so what do?
If you just try to take one super long shot from one side to the other, all those errors we just talked about, curvature and refraction, they're going to get huge and wreck your accuracy. So you need a smarter way to do it. You need a technique that's specifically designed to eliminate those errors.
And that technique is called reciprocal leveling. The name itself gives you a huge clue. You're going to take reciprocal, or matching, measurements from both sides of the thing that's in your way.
Now, this is where it gets really clever. This method is so powerful because it basically cancels out all the major systematic errors. By setting up on side A and measuring to B, and then moving over to side B and measuring back to A, any error you have is present in both sets of readings, but in opposite directions. So when you average them, the errors for curvature, for refraction, and even for a slightly misaligned instrument, what we call collimation error, they all just magically cancel each other out. It's an incredibly elegant field solution.
And this is the math behind it. It looks complicated, but it's not. All you're doing is finding the apparent height difference from your first setup, then finding the apparent height difference from your second setup. The true height difference, h, is just the average of those two results. You're letting the math cancel out the errors for you.
Okay, let's wrap this up with two slightly more advanced ideas. These really build on what we've just learned about the Earth's curve and instrument precision, and they'll give you a much deeper understanding of the topic.
So remember that combined correction formula from earlier? Well, if you just rearrange the algebra and solve it for distance instead of for the correction, you get this really cool formula. This tells you how far away the horizon is in kilometers, based on your height, h, in meters. So if you're standing on a cliff, you can calculate how far out to sea you can see. It's the exact same science, just flipped around to answer a different question.
And finally, let's talk about the instrument itself. What makes a really good, expensive level so precise? It all comes down to the sensitivity of its bubble. A more sensitive instrument, one that shows even the tiniest tilt, will have a bubble tube with a very large radius of curvature, which just means it's flatter. It also helps to have a perfectly smooth inside surface and a very thin, non-viscous liquid inside. All of these things let the bubble move freely and settle fast, letting you get a much more accurate reading much quicker.
And there you have it. That's the core of leveling that you really need to master for your exams. But the thing about engineering is the search for precision never really stops. So I'll leave you with this. We've learned how to correct for the planet's curve and for light bending through the air. But what else is out there? What about the instrument expanding and contracting with temperature? Or the ground itself settling under the tripod? The best engineers are the ones who never stop asking, what else could be affecting my measurements?